Good evening. On behalf of Sarah Wiggins, Interim Director of the Newark Public Library, and Board President Aisha Cooper, welcome to the Newark Public Library's James Brown African American Room. My name is Dale Colston, and I'm Assistant Director for Special Collections here at the library. I would like to acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Munsee Lenape First Nations on which we are learning, laboring, and organizing today. We also recognize the devastation and continued legacy of the transatlantic slave trade, which contributed to present-day systemic racism and oppression. This space at the library, the James Brown African American Room, was named in honor of the late James Library Brown, a librarian, poet, activist, and influencer who was instrumental in making sure that the libraries seek and maintain books and resources and present programs like these, examining and celebrating the African American experience. Mr. Brown was especially committed to urging Newark youth to pursue education and to understand the importance of the library's role in their academic growth. We are delighted to again partner with the Newark History Society. I am a member. Please consider membership. Thank you. And the New Jersey Performing Arts Center for tonight's program, Wards of Action, Black Women's Vision for Newark, 1966 through 1970. Our presenter is Dr. Karolina dos Santos, who is a Newark native, and we are delighted to have her with us this evening. Now, please join me in welcoming NJPAC's Director of Digital Marketing and Content Strategy, Katie Stein.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here tonight. My name is Katie, as she said, with the New Jersey Performing Arts Center, and we are really excited to present here tonight. We love partnering with all community members, especially the Newark History Society and the Newark Public Library. So next month, we kick off our jazz festival, which, if you don't like jazz, it's got a lot of other stuff too. We have Christian McBride coming. Chuck D and Rakim are leading a great night of hip hop and spoken word. Arturo Sandoval will be there. Omar Sosa, you got to be there. And since you guys are here, as a special thank you for coming out tonight, you can get 30% off of a variety of these shows if you type in Moody 30, Moody 30 for the TD James Moody Jazz Festival. And you can go to njpac.org/Moody to learn more about those shows and get tickets. But if jazz isn't your thing, there's also tons of other shows coming up. We've got Tom Papa in November. We have CC Winans in December. Lots of great holiday stuff coming around the corner. So I hope to see you down the street at NJPAC. And if you have any questions about our programming, please let me know. Thank you so much. I am introducing you. This is the lovely Tim Chris, everybody.
Well, thank you for joining us, either on Zoom. We already have 2 or 3 dozen joined on Zoom, and folks are filing in here from Rutgers and other places, Carolina. This is a special evening. When we started the Newark History Society 23 or 24 years ago, we hoped that there would be new scholars who would be taking a fresh look at Newark's varied history. And tonight is especially important because we have Karolina dos Santos, who is a native Newarker, born in the Ironbound, who has studied Newark's story from a sociological perspective. She attended Harvard as an undergraduate and then was a Peace Corps volunteer in the Dominican Republic for 2 or 3 years, then went back to Brown University to get her PhD and has since taught at both NYU and Kean University. When I first discussed the possibility of her making a presentation to us, she told me that her research about Newark has covered 3 different eras. Samuel Cornish in the 1840s, the 13th annual convention of the NAACP, which took place in Newark in 1922, but also the experience, particularly of women in Newark in activist roles in the late 1960s. And she said, that's the one I want to talk about. So, Karolina, we are thrilled to have you here. And please come up and talk us through your research.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this warm welcome. Thank you to NJ PAC, the Newark Public Library, and the Newark History Society for their work in coordinating this event and hosting us tonight. Um, so tonight, I thought we would celebrate Louise Epperson, Erlene Jackson Provitt, and Ruth McLean. We remember and honor their love for the city of Newark and their struggle to make the city a more equitable place for us all. But before I begin, I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and my own ties to this research. Oh, let's see. Let's see if the clicker is going to cooperate. Oh. Mm. It's taken a little break, but we should work. Just bear with us. Oh, so I actually, when I'll tell you this in a bit, but my family moved. Here we go. I will answer that question. So I wanted to say that I wouldn't be here today without Newark. The Ironbound is where my parents, my mother from Mexico, and my father from Brazil met and got married. This is where I was born at St. James Hospital, where I was baptized and experienced every major life event like my marriage. Although my family moved out of Newark when I was 6, we moved to Linden. We still returned here several times a week to attend Mass, visit family, and for me to attend the Luís Camões Portuguese School. So to answer your question, I actually went to Allied Health Sciences, part of the Union County Vocational Technical Schools in Scotch Plains. But as Jasmine Mans described in her poem, I come from a city that always had enough home to come home to. Although I cannot claim to be from Newark, it is big enough to have claimed me. So when I think of home, it's Newark that always comes to mind. My experience with Newark isn't unique. Many of the city's key historical figures weren't originally Newark natives, but the city welcomed them and they made Newark their home. Oh, let's see. Here we go. So typically, when we remember the activists who fought to make Newark a fairer city in the late 60s, we mostly think of men. We remember Harry Wheeler, a Newark native who was co-chairman of the medical school negotiation committee alongside Junius Williams. Both men stood up to the city of Newark, the Newark Housing Authority, the New Jersey College of Medicine and Dentistry, to iron out a historic set of agreements that gave Newarkers more access to healthcare, employment, and to represent themselves in urban renewal projects. We think back to Gus Henningberg, the architect of the Newark Plan to help Black and Puerto Rican Newarkers establish a foothold in the construction trades unions, an opportunity that would catalyze social mobility for hundreds of Newark families. Oh gosh. Mm. Now it's working. What I'm here to tell you tonight is that none of these historic gains would have been possible without Louise Epperson's, Erlene Jackson Provitz, and Ruth McLean's organizing efforts. Tonight, though we honor these women tonight specifically, they're part of a larger community of Black women activists who shaped our city into a fairer place for us all. I begin with Louise Epperson, the whistleblower regarding Mayor Adoniesio's unauthorized sale of 150 acres of land in Newark Central Ward to construct the New Jersey College of Medicine and Dentistry, hereafter the medical school. She was the co-chair of the Committee Against Negro and Puerto Rican Removal alongside Harry Wheeler. Then I move on to Arlene Jackson Provitt, who mobilized her friends, family, and neighbors to trust Junius Williams and support the Newark Area Planning Association to sustain the struggle against the medical school. Finally, I end with Ruth McLean, who worked closely with Gus Henningberg at the Greater Newark Urban Coalition to desegregate the city's private sector labor markets. It has been my honor and privilege to get to know these strong and fearless women through the archive and to watch them emerge triumphant despite significant challenges. Instead of talking about these women, I have carefully selected archival sources where they describe their work, challenges, and perspectives in their own words. So let us listen to them and share in their journey. Louise Epperson was born in Georgia in 1908 and raised in Florida. She moved to Newark during the Great Depression to join her sister and an aunt who had immigrated to the city years prior. In her oral history with Glenn Marie Brickus in 97, Louise recalled her first impression of Newark when she said, "Oh, I thought Newark was just the place to be. I thought it was just out of sight. I loved it." Louise loved Newark so much that after years of working her way up from domestic and secretarial work to become an occupational therapist, she laid down permanent roots in the city when she purchased her home on 12th Avenue. On a brisk New Year's Day in 1967, Louise unfolded the Sunday paper and saw an article announcing Mayor Adonisio's unauthorized sale of 150 acres of land to the medical school. Although she had heard rumors about the land sale, she was surprised to learn that her neighborhood was slated for demolition to make way for the new construction. In her oral history, she recalled that when she realized that the city of Newark could take her house by making it eminent domain, she vowed, "Well, when they do that, it will be over my dead body. I will not stand for that." Assertive and with caustic wit, Louise refused to submit quietly to eminent domain. She was the whistleblower who began the medical school struggle and in part ignited a rebellion. She referred to herself as the person who started the crying and belly whining about the medical school coming to Newark. Louise channeled her outrage into an organized revolt when she began informing and mobilizing her neighbors of the land sale to establish the Committee Against Negro and Puerto Rican Removal, hereafter the committee. Oh, so she started mobilizing her neighborhood the old-fashioned way, from door to door. Though she was 60 years old, she would climb 3 or 4 flights of stairs, urging tenants to come out and learn about the impending construction of the medical school, which would displace them from their homes. Louise remembered the first committee meeting held at her home, pictured here, and how those gathered nominated her to be the position of chairman. She said, "I didn't know what being the chairman meant, but it meant a lot of hard work." Part of that work included talking to community members in the places they convened to seek and express joy: taverns, bars, and dance clubs. In 1967, go-go dancing was at its height, so it was common to see young women perform stylized dances to rock and soul music on enclosed, elevated metal platforms that resembled cages, pictured here. After the dancers had finished their performance, Louise said, "I asked the manager if I could get in the cage and speak to the folks. I got up in the cage and told them I couldn't shake, but I wanted to shake their brains up so they could know what was happening in Newark. When the city of Newark refused to participate in a discussion with Louise and committee members about their concerns regarding the medical school, Louise brought Newarkers to Trenton. She organized 3 informal fundraising events during which committee members sold fish and chicken to pay for a chartered bus to transport them to Trenton. The purpose of their travel was to inform representatives of the state of New Jersey about the tensions unfolding in Newark over the impending construction of the medical school. Louise Epperson was relentless. Although she had a full-time job, she spent 6 months traveling between Newark and Trenton to get officials' attention to the damage the medical school would cause to the existing neighborhood and to alert them to palpable community discontent. 1 month before the rebellion, Louise and other committee members attended a blight hearing in Newark. Here, Louise offered the Central Planning Board a stark choice: negotiate fairer terms for the land sale with the organized resistance, or face the revenge that would ensue if they denied Black Newarkers their right to self-determination. She warned the representatives at the blight hearing, unless you build houses for us to go into and build schools for our Black children, there's going to be another second Watts. Only we will be better prepared for it. There is no need of having all this racial tension in this great city of ours. There is no need of having all this trouble here. The fate is in your hands. The blood will be on your hands also. Here, Louise noted all of this racial tension in the city of Newark and how there is no need of having all this trouble if only community officials would validate Black Newarkers' opposition to their forced displacement. Louise illuminated how the city's fate was in the officials' hands. Black Newarkers could not control whether or not city officials would listen to them, but they could control how they would respond. Louise reminded the board that they weren't dealing with a blighted neighborhood, but rather a tight-knit community. She admonished the board, this is not humane. To be human means something, gentlemen. This is the first thing you should think of. Not the medical school, not anything but people. In order to think of people, think of housing first. In this description, Louise illuminated how the Central Planning Board, City of Newark, and the medical school's board of directors could not or would not see Newark Central Ward as a community of people. Where the city of Newark was seeking economic development and revitalization at the expense of Black Newarkers, Louise recentered Black self-determination in community development. This was evident when she said, "You should have called us at the beginning. I don't know why you should think that whatever goes down in our neighborhood, we should not have something to say about what comes up in it." Louise and her committee sought to oppose any urban renewal program that was conducted without residential participation. Although Louise was directly impacted by the medical school, her leadership in rebelling against this urban renewal project was not only in her self-interest. She explained herself at the blight hearing. This is not for just Louise Epperson as an individual. It's for all of the 22,000 Black people. Louise contested the medical school to represent herself and all of her community members who had long been marginalized by Newark's structures of power and were now considered disposable and at risk of displacement by the medical school. On the evening of July 12th, 1967, Black Newarkers' outrage at having their self-determination constrained in tandem with police brutality erupted into a rebellion that lasted for 5 days. This collective act of self-determination finally brought state and federal attention to the total breakdown in communication occurring between the city of Newark and its Black residents. In her oral history, Louise recounted how, after the riots broke out, everybody that I tried to contact before this happened, they all came to my door to see what they could do to sit down for a community meeting in the city of Newark. The community meeting Louise had been seeking for 6 months prior to the rebellion finally became a reality. Erlene Jackson Provitt would be instrumental in mobilizing her friends, family, and neighbors to support Junius Williams and Harry Wheeler as they negotiated more favorable terms for the medical school construction during the trial hearings, which lasted from February to March 1968. Before we dive into Erlene's story, I want to correct a misspelling. Erlene Jackson Provitt is with one T, not two. I apologize for the mistake in the promotional materials, but I wanted to address it here. So, when Junius Williams first arrived in Newark in the mid 1960s, seeking to contest racialized urban renewal policies, he needed some help getting acquainted with the neighborhood. When writing the obituary for his dear friend, Erlene Jackson Provitt, he wrote, I wanted the people to rise up and say no to urban renewal, but he needed an anchor, a base. Erlene rose up to the challenge by mobilizing her friends, family, and neighbors to participate in the Newark Area Planning Association, hereafter NAPA. Erlene provided Williams with the base he needed to represent the community in negotiations. Erlene became the link between Williams and the Central Ward community. In the archive, I found a quote where Erlene said, people up north helped in the south. Although there was no further context, I deduced that perhaps she was explaining her motivation to help Williams. During the civil rights movement, activists from the North came to the South to participate, as featured here in the image of Freedom Summer from 1964. Perhaps Erlene used this quote to explain how, in Newark's case, Southerners like Williams came up north to help in the movement to resist urban renewal. Williams described Erlene in his memoir, Unfinished Agenda, as someone who cared about the people in the neighborhood. This reveals that she understood how urban renewal would decimate existing community networks, trusted Williams as someone who could help, and chose to help him. As he prepared to write her obituary, Williams cited Psalm 23. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. He named Erlene as his staff, symbolizing the care, support, and guidance she provided during his early organizing days in Newark, how she helped establish the name Napa, introduced us, told us who wasn't nothing and who we should embrace. She was my rock, my guiding light, he wrote. Erlene introduced Williams to her world, and she did it with flair. In his memoir, Williams recalled that the first time he met Erlene at the bar where she worked, she was wearing a cape made from window draperies. Erlene's flamboyance, gregariousness, and courage were her superpowers, enabling her to mobilize a community. Though I focus on Erlene, I will also mention her mother, Florence Jackson, and Juliet, one of their co-mobilizers, because all three women were present in an interview conducted by Junius Williams in 2005. Erlene, Florence, and Juliet represent working class Newark women who, despite juggling many responsibilities, still dedicated some of their precious time to mobilizing their communities to resist urban renewal. Erlene was born on April 16th, 1945, and she remembered that by the time she was 14 or 15, she was already involved with political mobilization in Newark. She recalled how Euless Honey Ward, campaigning to be Central Ward Democratic chairman at the time, would send her and other organizers to public housing projects to talk to community members about his campaign. Her mother, Florence Jackson, was also part of the campaign. Florence said, Honey had Erlene putting out literature in the early 60s. Florence stated with emphasis, we were unbeatable because we knew everybody in the bar, in the store, on Springfield Avenue. Florence and Erlene's strength was that they were not alone. They were an integral part of a community where everybody in the neighborhood knew them or knew of them. Florence and Erlene knew they were part of something bigger than themselves as individuals or even their kin. They were part of the Central Ward. Their community was their strength. Erlene embraced joy. Bars and clubs are key places to experience and express Black joy by creating, celebrating, dancing with other Black folks in the city. Erlene experienced and expressed joy through Newark's nightlife. She was a community fixture in local bars, and she worked in some of them as well. She affectionately referred to the Pink Palace, the Jive Shack, Little Joe's, Two Corners, and Inez Polly Polly's as our bars. These were places she felt at home in, where she knew the regulars and they knew her. It was this participation in Newark's lively nightlife that was a key mechanism in her mobilization strategy. Arlene and her mother, as they said, used bars to get people to vote. In this way, Arlene and Florence participated in Black placemaking. That is the process of creating sites of endurance, belonging, and resistance through social interaction with other Black folks. By joking, dancing, and chatting with her community members at her bars, Arlene mobilized the community to support Napa in their goal of resisting urban renewal that threatened the tight community networks she had spent her whole life building. In his interview, when Williams asked why the women dedicated so much time to mobilizing the community, Florence and Juliet offered insightful answers. Florence said, "To represent us, to see we got equal rights and power." Although Florence never elaborated on the us, her words suggest a Black collective we, positioning Black Newarkers as equal participants in the city's political and civil sphere. Juliet had a related answer. She cited self-determination to determine our destiny, how the struggle will be. The destiny Juliet names indicates Black Newarkers' right to choose what neighborhoods to live in, where to work, and what development could occur in their communities. Although Arlene is not listed as answering this question, her dedication to the struggle, even under the threat of physical harm, reveals that she was fighting for something bigger than herself or her neighborhood. For example, when Arlene was working on Ken Gibson's campaign in the North Ward, she encountered the threat of racial violence. She described the clash bluntly. "I had beat some ass on a beat in the North Ward. They talked shit, and we said, 'Bring your ass on. I'll kick you with this damn cast.' Not too many would go to the North Ward in 1970. With her vivid language, Arlene shows us how her mobilizing work took her outside of the Central Ward to other neighborhoods that were violently policed. Facing this significant physical risk at a moment when she was vulnerable indicates that, like her mother and Juliet, Arlene was fighting for something bigger than herself or the Central Ward. She fought for Black self-determination and power. Her commitment to the cause was further demonstrated when Arlene participated in the community discussion with Commissioner Goldberg to end the proposed Route 75 six-lane project highway in Newark. This project would have cut through some neighborhoods in the Central Ward to connect Route 280 and I-78. Williams described in his memoir, "I remember seeing Arlene and some of the Panthers standing on the conference room table. Most of the people were on their feet the entire time, cheering on the more aggressive. I just shut up and let them talk to the man." This image of Arlene standing on a conference table alongside members of the Black Panther Party demonstrates that she was not necessarily aligned with any one group or political candidate. Rather, she was committed to protecting Black rights and self-determination across the city. Arlene's tireless efforts to resist urban renewal plans that would decimate Black communities was complemented by Ruth McLean, who applied her education and work experiences to support innovative programming that would strengthen Black communities and neighborhoods in Newark. Ruth passed away recently in April of last year. In her obituary, she was remembered as an activist, poet, advocate, and art collector, and as a person well informed across a range of topics: a traveler, beach lover, Pan-Africanist, a race woman, museum docent, avid reader, and a serious jazz fan. Though she eventually left Newark, the impact she had on employment here was long lasting during a crucial moment of transition for the city. We honor her life and service to the city tonight. Ruth was academically gifted. By the age of 15, she had left her hometown of Cincinnati to enroll in Fisk University's early entrance program in 1955. After completing her undergrad degree in 1959, she became the first woman of color to earn a master's degree from Louisiana State University. By the time she was 21, she was living in Chicago and teaching second grade students in the city's South Side. However, teaching was not her vocation. It didn't give me the kind of total community activity I was interested in. In addition, I began to get some perception of the problems that created the lack of interest my students had, she said. Ruth's statement here suggests that she became more interested in the social problems enveloping the children's environment, such as insufficient income and housing insecurity, which were preventing them from absorbing the lessons she was teaching. At some point between 1961 and 62, Ruth married, becoming Mrs. Ruth McLean. This is how we know her in Newark, but after moving on from the city, she readopted her maiden name and preferred to be known as Ruth Rambo. By 1962, Ruth and her husband had relocated to New York and eventually settled in East Orange. For the next 7 years, Ruth would be involved with creating and coordinating community development programs in Essex County. She began working with the experimental Housing Employment Learning Program, or HELP, in Newark's Office of Economic Opportunity. When she was interviewed by the Star Ledger in 1967 regarding her work with the Essex County Urban League, she reflected on her experience with HELP. That really developed my commitment to Newark and my awareness of its problems. Though Ruth was not originally from Newark, she spent years learning about the city's challenges and committed herself to overcoming them through her community work. In the interview, she said, "I'm still learning. Now I believe that community organization is the key. Not working with individuals on their problems, but dealing with groups of people and helping to modify the community." After 5 years of working in Newark, Ruth considered herself someone who was still learning how to improve Black communities in Newark socially, economically, and politically. She understood that the problems facing Black families were complex, and thus the solutions must be as well. Her answer to these challenges was to work with entire communities and neighborhoods. By 1969, she was hired as the community relations specialist at the Greater Newark Urban Coalition, hereafter the Coalition. Ruth had been working to uplift Black communities in Newark for 7 years. As she recalled in an interview with Junius Williams in 2020, by that time, I had pretty much organized a whole bunch of things. So Henningberg figured he needed a community relations person, and I would be good, so he invited me to apply. As documented in the Star Ledger, Ruth assisted community groups and agencies in coordinating their operations and developing program ideas to improve community services. Yes, Ruth was a specialist in streamlining services, communicating clearly between different groups, and creating innovative programs to meet community needs. But she did more than that. The coalition interpreted Ruth's work between the coalition and the community as creating community fabric. That is, using her skills to strengthen existing organizations and initiatives in Newark. Ruth helped existing organizations communicate clearly with one another, develop new programming, and achieve their objectives. In this way, she strengthened Newark's existing civil society. For example, one of her duties with the coalition was serving as the co-chair of the Business and Industrial Coordinating Council, hereafter the BICC. This organization was formed in 1965 to provide opportunities for counseling, training, and placement services for unemployed minorities. In this way, the business community would be supplied with a steady flow of workers who were historically excluded from the labor market. Within 3 years of the BICC's founding, 920 Newark residents had found employment through this organization. Ruth was responsible for coordinating between the private sector in Newark and Black workers seeking employment in these companies. She matched workers with available positions. As she described her role in the interview with Junius Williams, BICC had been developed for the sole purpose of integrating Black people more fully into the business and industrial community. So it was getting Black people jobs, the kind of jobs and the corporations that they had never had before. She applied her guidance counseling skills to work directly with community members, channeling their skills and expertise into new kinds of employment previously closed to them. Though she focused on community work, I noticed that she didn't shy away from political work. 8 months into her position as community relations specialist with the coalition, the Star Ledger noticed how her active participation in the Black and Puerto Rican Convention of 1969 angered Mayor Hugh Adonisio. It isn't clear what Ruth's role in the convention was, but her active participation indicates that perhaps she was using her expertise as a community relations specialist to find how two different communities, Black Newarkers and Puerto Rican Newarkers, could find common interests and work together to nominate Ken Gibson for mayor. Ultimately, Mayor Ken Gibson's election spelled the end for the BICC. When Junius Williams asked Ruth to explain the BICC's demise, she explained how the need for it had changed. You had a Black mayor, you had an urban coalition, you had other organizations that were more preeminent and more powerful and had greater cachet. In other words, Black political power in Newark opened the door further to integrating the city's labor markets. Ruth explained further, the urban coalition and the mayor's office were the principal places where you could see that the business community had faith, felt were credible, and that they wanted to support. Her explanation reveals that once Newark's private sector accepted Black political power, it was compelled to address workforce integration more systematically. And it was about the private sector's support, Ruth elaborated, because the community was ready to engage in any effort at any time to make it better. So it was more a decision at another level and another place. Ruth's response flipped the problem of unemployment on its head. It was never a community problem, but a private sector issue. The community was always ready to engage in any effort at any time. It was Newark's private sector that needed to be compelled to change its hiring practices. Ruth's work with the coalition, both in community services and in political organizing, ushered in a new era of Black power in Newark, effectively terminating the BICC. Her leadership guided Newarkers to access employment and political power during a time of tumultuous change. Like Louise and Earlene, Ruth believed wholeheartedly in Black people's right to employment, political power, and the ability to choose their destiny. The time she spent in Newark was dedicated to paving the way for Black communities and families to reach their full potential. Of the women honored here tonight, only Earlene was a native Newarker. Yet, despite their different birthplaces, all three women made Newark home and were committed to its progress. Louise and Earlene used their social networks to mobilize support that ultimately reduced the scope of the medical school, thereby preserving Black neighborhoods and negotiating for a project that would benefit the surrounding community. Ruth applied her formal education in her work, coordinating between Newark's Black community and its private sector to desegregate the city's labor markets. All three women provided unconditional support and guidance to Harry Wheeler, Junius Williams, and Gus Henningberg, contributing directly to their success and legacy. The purpose of tonight's talk was to demonstrate how Wheeler's, Williams, and Henningberg's success was always entangled with these women's work. Louise began a mobilization, Arlene convinced community members to trust Williams, and Ruth translated Black workers' skills to meet the private sector's needs. Tonight, we celebrate their work and thank them for their service. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for questions. Anyone want to start? Well, let's.
Thank you. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment of when you were talking about how she was talking about the revitalization or kind of going against the revitalization without input from Newark's Black residents. Uh, it was so striking how history kind of repeats itself again with the ongoing gentrification in the different wards of Newark now, and how this happened again so many years ago. So when you talked about it, and especially I was really thankful that you used her words. It was kind of just seeing a lot of the feelings that I've heard so many of my neighbors talk about. And it was just like talking to one of my neighbors and hearing her talk about like her feelings and um, her point of view on what's going on in the community today and years ago.
Absolutely. I think this is why I engage so much in historical work, because it helps us understand the present, that what we're seeing today, these cycles of displacement, are not new. But what I wanted to show tonight is that they have always been contested, that maybe not every mobilization has been successful, but Newarkers like Louise Epperson, Erlene Jackson Provitt have always pushed back, have always stood up for their communities. But this is what's really important to me, is rescuing, I wouldn't use the word rescuing, maybe unearthing those stories from the archive to show that folks never took this at face value. They never accepted it. They always fought back against it. And that's what I wanted to show here tonight.
A question.
I want to make a comment about the economic disparities between groups of like between the groups and the organizations. I want to know like why these women are not told like why these women are not told in schools, like is not told in the community. So it makes me change my perspective. Yeah.
That's why I started this talk myself. And I asked one of our archivists, Beth Zach Cohen, as well. I'm like, where's where is this in the archive? And I want to highlight what I really liked. The person who got me thinking about this was Erlene Jackson Provitt, because she's, a mother, working class, and she's just so full of life. And I'm like, I wish I had her archive, like I want to know more about her. But I I also wonder why this doesn't get taught more in schools in our Newark's history. And so, we live in a society that's structured by race, class, and gender. And so that's why it's really important to pay particular attention to Black women's stories, particularly working class Black women. And I noticed that it's really difficult to find their stories in the archive in history. And the reason for that is, right, like once they pass away, where do you put all their stuff? Or even it's like, family members are dealing with dealing with all the funeral arrangements and having their papers preserved. Is there enough space for it? Where does it go? So I notice, or the explanation I come up with myself, it's that intersection of race, class, and gender. and why I really wanted to focus on working class women in our community. And I had to lift their stories from men's archives and really paying particular attention to who they were. Yeah. So the majority of this work that I was able to find their words and their stories through the Henningberg collection and through the Junius Williams collection that is, as of right now, still unsorted, but it was so cool to see these bursts of Black women's life, their thoughts, their struggle just pop through. I couldn't not write about it.
Junius, do you want to add anything to that and how your archive is being used?
Yes, thank you for donating it.
I appreciate what you've done. I was, when you come to a session like this and you've done the work and you say, well, I wonder how she's going to use that. But I can say that I really appreciate what you did. It was sensitive and it was accurate. There's only one thing I want to add. I don't have a whole lot to say because you said it all. Uh, some of this, well, two things. Some of this is being used in the schools in Newark because I asked that the Rise Up Newark be used, and apparently it is being used in 10 schools, 10 high schools, not as a whole class of study, but integrated with what the teacher is already talking about. I would like to see a whole class based on that, as
Same.
well as on my book. So that's something to look forward to. But just a personal testimony, because you don't always have the people who were with the folks in the subject still alive, and I'm one of the last ones standing for whatever reason. But I worked with all of those women. I had a great love and friendship for each one of them for particular reasons. Louise started the medical school fight because she was a homeowner. When I came onto the scene, it was my first opportunity to really exercise some leadership. I had been working with other people up to that point and had a particular idea about how we could fight this medical school with an alternate plan and with a lawsuit, et cetera. It's all in the book that you saw up there on the screen. But just to talk about Louise is to talk about a tough woman who could stand up to the men all around her. Let's go to Ruth McLean. Same thing. She might have worked for Gus Henningberg, but she worked with Gus Henningberg and the rest of us. She moved to South Carolina. We had a lot of fun. I used to go down there until one day I got the word that she was gone. But then coming back to Earlene, one thing you didn't pick up, and it's probably because it's not, but now you will know. You got a little hint of it when she had said she had to go to the North Ward to kick some ass. Well, Earlene was part of my security. I had another guy named Jerry O'Neill, who was, there were two of them. And that's the reason why I didn't get my ass kicked. A lot of times, not in that neighborhood where we were, but externally, because there were a lot of people who wanted to do that, but they knew they had to deal with Earlene. I watched the Jacksons, the whole family. This is my last comment. I watched the Jacksons take on another family in the neighborhood. Some kind there was some kind of grudge that was going on about, I don't know what it was all about, but one, two, three, four brothers plus Earlene with Ma Jackson on the front porch directing traffic, get him over here. And they did. Nobody messed with Earlene. It just evolved that way. We talk about men, you usually see men, but you remember there were Amazon women and there were all kinds of women in history who performed the military duties. Well, Earlene was one of them. And I'm just so happy that you were talking about her in particular, because she, of all of the three, gets the least attention.
Mhm.
There's in my website, riseupnewark.com, riseupnewark.com. There's a whole section that I put in there on women, on Black and Puerto Rican women,
Mhm.
and you will be able to read some of the things intact that our brilliant researcher has woven together. It brought back memory of seeing them folks up there on that table down there at the highway department too. That was really a great moment in my life. I tell you, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much.
May I throw in perhaps an academic question?
Of
You're
course.
approaching this from sociology,
Yeah.
and you say on your website that you take a Du Boisian approach to this. What does that mean in terms of dealing with archival material about these three women and others like them?
Yes, I wonder if, well, I can't go back on the slide now, but that's I threw my sociological hat on when describing Black placemaking and the role that bars had in mobilization, how important it was, because what I really wanted to show is that yes, this was a tense struggle. There was violence, but there was also joy. And that's my sociological approach, that we can never set aside Black joy. Its importance to mobilization, particularly to reshaping networks of power. You need Black joy to cultivate that. And what I got from the archive, I'll leave it to Mr. Williams to confirm, but I think Arlene recognized that. And I think she was, a part of this nightlife. She was well known. And Louise as well, which is why she was going to the bar. She's like, you can't leave aside Black joy when mobilizing. Let's meet the people where they're at, where they're having fun, and let's talk to them, because the two aren't necessarily, they're not separate. They go together. And so that's where my sociological approach comes to this.
Oh, sorry I missed it, but I was living here then, so I'm okay. Um, and I hope this has been taped.
I think so, yes.
Okay, my question is, I'm really interested in the influence, if any, of the Star Ledger
Mm-hmm.
and what role it may have played in terms of the information that you received, primarily because the Star Ledger was not friendly to the
Mhm.
Central Ward, and
Yeah.
particularly to the public housing projects and the people who lived in it. So I'm really interested in what role it may have had to play in terms of the interpretation of this information.
I agree with you. There was some, sketchy coverage sometimes where you would read it and you're like, I think I noticed this when I was researching Ruth McLean and how she had sued the Urban League over gender discrimination. And the Star Ledger, the whole article, they talked about the Urban League's position, but they never quoted Ruth McLean or her side of the story. So that's the inkling that I got, that I'm just like, okay, I need to be careful. But the way I worked my way around it is by really focusing on whatever was in quotes, because that means, or what I understand it to mean, is that was verbatim. So that's why I focused on not necessarily how the Star Ledger covered the story, but what they had quoted the women saying. And I worked with that.
The reason why I say it because in the neighborhood they called it the Star Liar, and unfortunately, it shaped public perception about the city of Newark and particularly Black people and Puerto Ricans in the Central Ward.
Mm-hmm.
For generations, it still has influence today on how people see Newark. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really concerned about that. Even Mount Laurel,
Yeah.
it had significant impact on the decision in Mount Laurel where people didn't want people from Newark to move to their communities and sent money to Newark to keep them there.
Yeah. No, I agree. The way I made sense of it was uh, working with what I had and the archive in general. If we think about what stories get saved, whose stories get saved. It's an institution of power as well. The archive is not a neutral space. If it was, we'd have more stories like Arlene's. We'd have more accounts of Black women's lives in the 1700s, the 1800s. So the archive is a representation of power. But the approach I take to it is from historian Saidiya Hartman, is reading against the grain. This is what I have to work with. How do I think about it critically? This is the only place where Ruth McLean's work is documented or where I have a quote from her. So how do I read it against the grain and make sure to center her agency, her humanity, and her work?
Hi, I'm Beth. I work in the archive upstairs. So, and I've been researching women's history as well on newarkwomen.com blog. So I just wanted to say that, as you said about the archives being historically biased, so if people do know people right now who have these stories and this important history, please think about donating it to the library or another archive where it can be seen so that we can save that important history for the future, because historically it was biased, so we want to change that for the future. And another thing, we have digitized a lot of this stuff at digital.mpl.org, which was done in 2016. So it was very exciting to see that some of that was used in this great research, and people can go on there and see some of these documents. And then Junius has done some of his as well on Rise Up Newark, and we hope to add some more of his since we have his archive there. So definitely think about donating your archives. I just wanted to
Yes,
say that.
please.
I came in a little bit later too, but what I saw was wonderful, and thank you for the work that you do, and Mr. Williams as well. Praise God. It's great to know about our history, so we can know where we're going forward. I think with this, I would ask the question, because you mentioned that it's in the school system, right? Your books and things like that. So are we using those materials to mobilize now? Like, how can we use these models to kind of transform what we're doing right now? Because when I heard the statement about a new arc, that's what really prompted me to want to come, because I had that same sentiment within my spirit about what Newark should be. And so I just would like us as a people, as a whole, as, multicultural, all of it, being in Newark and wanting to see the best of Newark, that we can use these as models to move forward.
I can respond to that because that's one of the reasons why I did the work that I did and continue to do. I wanted to make sure that a new generation understands what we went through within a lifetime. And so the short answer to that is I don't think too much is used to connect the dots, to make sure that when you go out and you mobilize people, you got to organize people before you mobilize people, and that's one of the main things I talk about. And I had a class at Rutgers talking about organizing too. But one of the things that we miss is that because it's too easy just to get a group of people together using the website, using the various kinds of platforms that people have. You think you can call a meeting to go to City Hall? Okay, but do you have a yellow pad at least to take the names and the addresses and the phone numbers of people down there so you can call them back to another meeting? That's not happening enough. Point on the whole thing about bars. Bars was where we organized in that community. Earlene had her favorite bar, which was the Pink Palace. Jerry had his favorite bar, which was Tipping Inn. And then there was another one. All of these bars no longer exist. They were all up in that medical school area, and that was where most of us like to go. I talk about that in the book because we had some nice middle class ladies to come with us, and we weren't in there just to have fun. We had fun. But when you go to a bar and some dude comes up to you and offers to buy you a drink, you got to take that drink. and you got to drink it. And then don't worry about what's going to happen next, because Jerry and Erlene are going to make sure it didn't go further than that drink. So these kinds of lessons, I think, and I appreciate you offering me the time to explain it, because I'm an organizer. I'm still an organizer, and folks, most of us in this room, we're past the age that I'm trying to get, except her, of trying to get folks to get out there and do the next stage. So that's that's a great question, and I hope some other people take this information and do something with it.
Comment?
Um, I'm glad that I captured the spirit of what the work that the bars were doing, and thank you for sharing. It wasn't just fun; it was also work. The two go together, and I agree. I think the rise of social media, while it's really helpful, it's also preventing that kind of face-to-face interaction. That kind of interaction. We're in a different age now. And I'm curious as well. I'm a millennial, so I'm still not as tech savvy as Gen Z. I mean, I still do a lot of face-to-face interaction, but I do see the change that it has made in organizing, and I don't have answers yet about how we can find a middle ground between, what happened in the 60s organizing at bars versus the social media platforms. How do we, it's becoming clear to me that we need a middle ground, but how to get there is the question.
In addition to bars being a place where African Americans met, historically, you had your churches, of course, everyone knows about that, but also funeral homes. And some of those funeral home operators were the backbone economically for the movement in 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Wow. Yes.
Barbershops and hairdressers. And now when you have what's
Absolutely.
the voice that comes on, the voice that people have on, it turns on. People say Miss whatever she comes on. It makes it uncomfortable to be in a barbershop or a hairdresser because it's collecting the data, and that was a safe space.
Dale, Nancy has a.
Hello. Well, sometimes we still carry around our sign-in sheets. So
The clipboard.
I have mine, and I hope that you all will, come by later. We are still fighting the same kind of fights to control what happens in our neighborhood. And it goes on. The beat goes on. And it's very wonderful to hear these stories and know whose shoulders we're resting on. And thank you very much.
Thank
And I'll
you.
see I hope.
Any other comments or questions you want to follow up?
It may be a bigger issue, but as you're saying, in terms of mobilizing or things like that, I'm not sure if that's something, the domain that you want to be in, but perhaps one way could be when people sign up or they email and you have those emails, that it can be kept in, sort of a format or, and a permission, perhaps a permission slip to say, it's okay to use my information, or it's okay to contact me. That may be one way.
I just wanted to add, hey, Junius, how are you? He's like my hero. So I'm actually kind of shocked that this is where I was led to tonight. I had no idea. It's not like we talked about it at all. But what I think is really interesting about the movement, as someone who is a growing organizer and mobilizer, Black farmers are coming in a very important way than we have ever been respected and always have been powerful. But we're literally talking about it consistently, how we are using the farm space, the land space, that movement to advocate. So I'd say a great thing also is to support the local agriculture in your community, support the local growers. There's a lot of movement and momentum going on. I don't know if you've seen a lot of these different bills and stuff. The SNAP, we are all on top of it, donating food in those spaces. We're collecting information. We're creating coalitions. We are also trying to find this new communal way in our way, right? Because I wasn't introduced to it, but how we can like reclaim that freedom through this land space that's open to everybody. And the urban farming movement is really important because we're just existing within neighborhoods, in communities, and we can really do a lot of organizing work through those spaces.
Mhm. I love that. And food sovereignty as well.
Huge.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everyone for coming tonight, but I especially want to thank you, Carolina dos Santos. I think we're going to be hearing a lot from you in the future. And this was really a splendid program. Thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
And I just want to add, we have so many activists in the room, but Arnold Cohen and Nancy Zach and the Ironbound Community Corporation, there is an exhibit upstairs about community activism in that area. It's on view until the end of the year up on the 3rd floor, celebrating the 55 years of service of the Ironbound Community Corporation. So take a look. Thank you and good night.